Welcome back to Legacy Book Insight, where we dive deep into the stories that shaped empires, the minds that built legacies, and the books that changed everything. I'm your host, and today we're exploring one of the most raw, honest, and inspiring business memoirs ever written. Phil Knight's Shoe Dog, a memoir by the creator of Nike. This isn't just another business success story. This is the untold journey of how a shy, insecure kid from Oregon built one of the most recognizable brands on earth, almost by accident. Knight doesn't sugarcoat anything. He shows us the sleepless nights, the crushing anxiety, the moments when Nike was literally days away from bankruptcy. And somehow, through sheer stubbornness and a little bit of magic, he created a company that would revolutionize not just sports but culture itself. So grab your favorite pair of sneakers, settle in, and let's dive into the extraordinary story of how Nike came to be. Because this memoir will change how you think about entrepreneurship, failure, and what it really takes to build something that lasts. Chapter 1: The Crazy Idea. Our story begins in 1962. Phil Knight is 24 years old, fresh out of Stanford Business School and completely lost. Unlike his classmates who are rushing toward prestigious jobs at established corporations, Knight has what he calls his crazy idea. And like most crazy ideas, it starts with a simple observation. Knight notices that high-quality running shoes are dominated by German companies like Adidas and Puma. But he also notices something else. Japanese companies are making excellent products at lower costs, disrupting industries left and right. Cars, electronics, cameras. Why not shoes? His Stanford thesis explores this exact concept. Import high-quality, low-cost running shoes from Japan and sell them in America. His professors are skeptical. His father thinks he's wasting his Stanford education. But Knight has something that will define his entire journey. He has conviction without certainty. After graduation, Knight doesn't immediately start his company. Instead, he does what any reasonable person would do. He takes a soul-searching trip around the world. But this isn't just tourism. This is research. This is preparation. And most importantly, this is the journey that will lead him to Japan and change everything. The trip takes Knight through Hawaii, then to Japan, where he visits the Onitsuka Tiger Company in Kobe. Now here's where the story gets interesting. Knight walks into their offices with no appointment, no credentials, no business plan beyond his Stanford thesis. Just pure audacity in his crazy idea. When the Onitsuka executives ask which company he represents, Knight makes a split-second decision that will define his entire future. He tells them he represents Blue Ribbon Sports, a company that doesn't exist. He's naming his future business on the spot, making it up as he goes along. The name comes from the blue ribbons he remembers from childhood track meets. Simple, honest, and completely improvised. But here's what makes Knight special. He doesn't just talk about importing shoes. He understands running. He was a decent miler at the University of Oregon, training under the legendary Bill Bowerman. Knight knows what runners need because he is a runner. This authenticity, this deep understanding of his customer, becomes the foundation of everything Nike will become. The Onitsuka executives are intrigued. They agree to send samples to this mysterious Blue Ribbon Sports. Knight leaves Japan with handshake agreements and a head full of possibilities. But he also leaves with something more dangerous. Chapter 2: The Birth of Blue Ribbon Sports. Back in Oregon, Knight faces reality. He has samples coming from Japan, but he doesn't have a company, customers, or any idea how to actually run a business. What he does have is his father's basement and $50 borrowed against his car insurance. The first shoes arrive and they're beautiful. Tiger running shoes, well-made and reasonably priced. Knight's heart races as he opens the boxes. But now comes the hard part: actually selling them. Knight's first sale happens at a track meet. He loads the shoes into his green Plymouth Valiant and drives to meets around the Pacific Northwest. He sets up a small display and starts talking to runners. These aren't sophisticated sales presentations. Knight is nervous, awkward, often stumbling over his words. But he's genuine and runners can tell. His first customer buys a pair of tigers for himself and recommends them to his friends. Word spreads slowly through the running community. Knight realizes he's not just selling shoes. He's becoming part of something bigger. The running boom is just beginning in America, and he's positioned perfectly to ride the wave. But running a business from his father's basement isn't sustainable. Knight needs help, and he finds it in an unlikely place. He remembers his old track coach at the University of Oregon, Bill Bowerman. Bowerman isn't just any coach. He's an innovator, constantly experimenting with training methods, always tinkering with equipment to help his athletes perform better. Knight approaches Bowerman with a proposition: 50-50 partnership in Blue Ribbon Sports. Bowerman will contribute his coaching reputation and knowledge of what athletes need. Knight will handle the business side. It's a partnership that will define both their lives. Bowerman agrees, and suddenly Blue Ribbon Sports has credibility. When the legendary Bill Bowerman endorses your running shoes, people listen. Orders start coming in more regularly. But success brings new challenges. Cash flow becomes a constant nightmare. Knight is always scrambling to pay for inventory, always dancing on the edge of bankruptcy. He takes a job as an accountant at Price Waterhouse, not because he loves accounting, but because he needs steady income to keep Blue Ribbon alive. He works all day at his regular job, then comes home and runs Blue Ribbon from his kitchen table. His girlfriend, now wife Penny, helps pack shoes and handle orders. This isn't glamorous entrepreneurship. This is grinding, exhausting, all-consuming work. But something magical is happening. The running community is embracing Tiger shoes. Sales are growing. And Knight is learning that building a business isn't about having all the answers. It's about being willing to figure things out as you go, making mistakes, adapting, and never giving up on your crazy idea. Chapter 3: The Early Team and Growing Pains. By the late 1960s, Blue Ribbon Sports is growing, but it's still essentially a one-man operation with Knight doing everything. He realizes he needs help, but he doesn't want to hire just anyone. He wants people who understand the mission, who share the passion, who are willing to work for almost nothing in exchange for being part of something special. Enter Jeff Johnson, Blue Ribbon's first full-time employee. Johnson is a runner, a true believer in the product, and absolutely obsessed with customer service. He doesn't just sell shoes. He builds relationships with every customer, remembering their names, their running goals, their personal stories. Johnson turns customers into evangelists for the brand. But Johnson is also intense, perhaps too intense. He writes Knight long, detailed letters about every aspect of the business. Marketing ideas, product improvements, philosophical discussions about the company's mission. These letters are brilliant but overwhelming. Knight appreciates Johnson's passion but sometimes feels suffocated by his enthusiasm. Johnson opens Blue Ribbon's first retail store in Santa Monica. It's a tiny space, barely more than a closet, but it becomes the heart of Southern California's running community. Serious runners make pilgrimages to Johnson's store, not just to buy shoes but to talk about running, to connect with others who share their obsession. This is where Knight starts to understand something crucial about building a brand. It's not just about the product. It's about creating a community, a culture, a shared identity. Runners who wear Tigers don't just have shoes. They belong to something. As sales grow, so do the challenges. The relationship with Onitsuka becomes increasingly strained. Communication is difficult across cultures and time zones. Onitsuka starts making demands that feel unreasonable to Knight. They want more control over how Blue Ribbon operates in America. They threaten to find new distributors if Knight doesn't comply. Meanwhile, Bill Bowerman is working on something revolutionary in his workshop. He's experimenting with different sole designs, trying to create better traction for runners. His breakthrough comes when he pours rubber into his wife's waffle iron, creating the prototype for what will become the famous waffle sole. It's innovation born from obsession with performance. But turning Bowerman's innovations into actual products means working with Onitsuka's factories in Japan, and the relationship is becoming increasingly complicated. Cultural misunderstandings, language barriers, and different business philosophies create constant friction. Knight realizes he's building something valuable, but he doesn't fully control it. Blue Ribbon Sports is successful, but it's entirely dependent on a Japanese company that might cut him off at any moment. This vulnerability keeps him awake at night, drives him to find solutions, and ultimately forces him to think bigger than he ever imagined. The team is growing beyond Knight and Johnson. They hire Bob Waddell, a former University of Oregon athlete who brings operational expertise. They add Jeff Hollister, another Oregon runner who understands the product and the market. Each new hire isn't just an employee. They're believers, missionaries for the brand, willing to work for modest salaries in exchange for being part of something revolutionary. But cash flow remains a constant crisis. Knight is always scrambling to finance inventory, always worried about having enough money to pay for the next shipment from Japan. He maxes out credit cards, borrows against everything he owns, and still can't sleep at night worrying about money. This is the paradox of fast-growing businesses. Success creates its own problems. Every increase in sales requires more inventory, which requires more cash, which creates more risk. Knight is learning that growth isn't always good if it outpaces your ability to finance it. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point with Onizuka. By the early 1970s, the cracks in the relationship with Onizuka are becoming impossible to ignore. What started as cultural misunderstandings have evolved into fundamental disagreements about the future of the partnership. Knight wants to expand aggressively in America. Onizuka wants more control and is starting to question whether Blue Ribbon Sports is the right partner for their ambitions. The breaking point comes during a trip to Japan. Knight and several Blue Ribbon executives travel to Onizuka's headquarters for what they think are routine business meetings. Instead, they walk into what feels like an interrogation. Onizuka executives question every aspect of Blue Ribbon's operations, suggest they might be better served by larger, more established distributors. Knight realizes that Onizuka sees Blue Ribbon Sports as expendable. They've helped build the Tiger brand in America, but now that it's successful, Onizuka thinks they can find bigger partners who can scale faster. It's a brutal lesson in business relationships. Success doesn't guarantee loyalty. But Knight also realizes something else during this trip. He doesn't want to be just a distributor anymore. He wants to create something original, something that belongs entirely to Blue Ribbon Sports. The idea of starting their own shoe company with their own designs and their own manufacturing begins to take shape. This is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Starting their own brand means competing directly with Onizuka, means finding new manufacturers, means designing shoes from scratch. It means risking everything they've built on an even crazier idea than the original one. Back in Oregon, Knight shares his thinking with the team. The response is mixed. Some see the opportunity to build something truly their own. Others worry about the risks of breaking with Onizuka. But gradually, consensus builds around a simple truth. If they're going to survive and thrive long-term, they need to control their own destiny. Bill Bowerman is immediately supportive. He's been frustrated by Onizuka's reluctance to implement his design innovations. The waffle sole concept has been sitting on the shelf because Onizuka doesn't see the value. Bowerman wants to create shoes that represent his vision of what running footwear should be. Jeff Johnson, the first employee and true believer, has an idea for the brand name. He's been keeping lists of potential names, thinking about what captures the spirit of what they're trying to build. His suggestion is simple but powerful. Nike after the Greek goddess of victory. Knight isn't immediately sold on the name. It feels too bold, too presumptuous. But as he thinks about it, the name starts to make sense. Nike represents victory, achievement, the pursuit of excellence. It's aspirational without being pretentious. It's memorable and distinctive. The decision to break with Onizuka and start Nike isn't made in a single moment. It evolves over months of discussions, planning, and soul-searching. Knight knows he's about to bet everything on another crazy idea. But he also knows he doesn't have a choice. Standing still means slow death. Moving forward means risking everything for the chance to build something extraordinary. The legal complications of separating from Onitsuka are complex and expensive. Knight hires lawyers, negotiates termination agreements, and prepares for the inevitable lawsuits. But behind the legal maneuvering, he's focused on something more important: creating the first Nike shoes. Chapter 5: The Birth of Nike and Early Struggles. The year 1971 marks the official birth of Nike, but it's not a celebration. It's a desperate scramble for survival. Knight and his team are essentially starting over, but with more at stake and less room for error. They have existing customers who expect continuity, employees who need paychecks, and creditors who demand payment. Finding a manufacturer to produce Nike shoes becomes an odyssey. Knight travels through Asia, visiting factories, negotiating with suppliers who have never heard of this small American company. Language barriers, cultural differences, and limited budgets make every conversation challenging. Finally, Knight finds a factory in Japan willing to work with Nike, but the terms are harsh. Minimum orders are high, payment terms are strict, and quality control is uncertain. Knight signs the contracts anyway because he doesn't have alternatives. Sometimes entrepreneurship isn't about making good choices. It's about making the least bad choice available. The first Nike shoes are honestly not great. Quality control issues plague early production runs. Shoes fall apart, colors fade, sizing is inconsistent. Customer complaints pour in, and Knight spends sleepless nights wondering if he's destroyed everything they built with Blue Ribbon Sports. But there are also signs of hope. Bill Bowerman's waffle sole design finally gets implemented, and it's revolutionary. Runners immediately notice the improved traction and comfort. Word spreads through the running community about this innovative new sole technology. Nike has its first genuine product innovation. The famous Nike swoosh logo comes from an unlikely source. Carolyn Davidson, a graphic design student at Portland State University, creates the logo for $35. Knight isn't thrilled with the design initially, but it grows on him. The swoosh suggests movement, speed, and the wing of Nike, the goddess of victory. It's simple, memorable, and scalable. Marketing the new Nike brand requires creativity and frugality in equal measure. Knight can't afford traditional advertising, so the team gets creative. They give shoes to college coaches, hoping to get Nike on the feet of successful athletes. They attend track meets, not as sponsors but as passionate supporters of the running community. Jeff Johnson continues to be Nike's secret weapon in building brand loyalty. His customer service is legendary. He remembers every customer's name, follows up on their running progress, and treats each sale as the beginning of a relationship rather than a transaction. This personal touch becomes part of Nike's DNA. But cash flow remains a constant crisis, made worse by the need to finance two different product lines during the transition from Tiger to Nike. Knight is borrowing money from everyone he knows, maxing out every available credit line, and still coming up short. The stress is enormous, affecting his health, his marriage, and his ability to sleep. The breakthrough comes gradually. Runners who try Nike shoes become converts. The waffle sole technology genuinely improves performance, and word spreads through the tight-knit running community. Sales start to grow, but so do the operational challenges of managing rapid expansion. Knight realizes he needs more sophisticated financial management. The company is too complex now for kitchen table accounting. He hires financial professionals, implements better inventory control systems, and starts thinking like a real business rather than an extended hobby. But even as Nike grows, Knight never loses sight of the core mission. This isn't about making money, although money is necessary for survival. It's about serving runners, advancing the sport, and proving that innovation and passion can triumph over establishment and convention. Chapter 6: The Steve Prefontaine Era. In 1972, Nike encounters a force of nature named Steve Prefontaine. Pre, as everyone calls him, is a middle-distance runner from the University of Oregon with an unusual combination of talent and charisma. He's not just fast. He's magnetic, controversial, and utterly uncompromising in his pursuit of excellence. Knight first meets Prefontaine through Bill Bowerman, who coaches Pre at Oregon. Bowerman recognizes that Prefontaine isn't just another talented athlete. He's a potential icon, someone who could change how Americans think about distance running. And he's exactly the kind of athlete who could elevate the Nike brand. Prefontaine's approach to running is revolutionary for American athletics. He believes in aggressive, front-running tactics. While other distance runners employ careful pacing strategies, Pri goes to the front early and dares everyone else to keep up. It's risky, sometimes foolish, but absolutely captivating to watch. More importantly for Nike, Prefontaine understands the connection between equipment and performance. He's obsessed with finding shoes that help him run faster, and he's willing to experiment with new designs and technologies. When he starts wearing Nike shoes, it's not just an endorsement. It's a partnership in innovation. The relationship with Prefontaine teaches Knight important lessons about athlete marketing. Pri doesn't just wear Nike shoes. He embodies Nike values. His aggressive, never-give-up racing style perfectly matches the brand's emerging identity. He makes Nike cool in a way that traditional advertising never could. But Prefontaine is also challenging to work with. He's opinionated, demanding, and uncompromising. He wants custom shoes designed specifically for his needs, and he's not shy about criticizing Nike when products don't meet his standards. Knight learns to see this criticism as valuable feedback rather than personal attack. The partnership with Prefontaine culminates in the 1972 Olympics in Munich. Pri makes the team in the 5,000 meters, and Nike sees an opportunity for global exposure. If Prefontaine can medal while wearing Nike shoes, it would be a marketing coup beyond Knight's wildest dreams. The Munich Olympics become a nightmare for different reasons. The terrorist attack on Israeli athletes overshadows the athletic competitions, and Prefontaine finishes fourth in his event, just missing a medal. But even in disappointment, Pri handles himself with dignity and charisma that further elevates his profile. After Munich, Prefontaine becomes even more valuable to Nike. He's no longer just a college athlete. He's a professional runner, one of the first American distance runners to achieve celebrity status. His races are events, drawing crowds who come as much to see Pri's personality as his running. Knight starts to understand the power of athlete endorsements, but not in the traditional sense. This isn't about paying celebrities to wear your products. It's about finding athletes who genuinely believe in your mission, who use your products to achieve greatness, who become walking, running advertisements for your brand values. Prefontaine's relationship with Nike goes beyond business. He becomes a friend to many Nike employees, a regular presence at company events, a voice in product development discussions. He helps Nike understand what elite athletes need from their equipment, and his feedback drives continuous innovation. But the relationship with Prefontaine also teaches Knight about the fragility of building a brand around individual personalities. Athletes get injured, lose form, retire, or move to different sponsors. Creating sustainable success means building something bigger than any single endorser, no matter how charismatic. The Prefontaine era establishes Nike's credibility in the running community and begins to define the brand's personality. Nike isn't just about making shoes. It's about supporting athletes who embody excellence, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of improvement. These values, first embodied by Prefontaine, become the foundation of Nike's identity. Chapter 7: Financial Crises and Near-Death Experiences. By the mid-1970s, Nike is experiencing the classic entrepreneur's paradox. Sales are growing rapidly, but cash flow is getting worse, not better. Every increase in orders requires more inventory investment, which requires more borrowing, which increases financial risk. Knight feels like he's riding a tiger that he can't control. The banking relationships become increasingly strained. Nike's primary bank, First National Bank of Oregon, starts questioning the company's aggressive growth strategy. Loan officers who once seemed supportive are now asking hard questions about sustainability and risk management. Knight realizes that bankers and entrepreneurs speak different languages. The crisis reaches its peak when the bank threatens to call Nike's loans. Knight finds himself in the surreal position of arguing for his company's life in sterile conference rooms with men in conservative suits who have never run a mile in their lives. They see numbers on spreadsheets. Knight sees dreams and possibilities, but the numbers are genuinely scary. Nike is technically profitable, but profitability doesn't pay bills. Cash flow does, and Nike's cash flow is negative and getting worse. Knight is borrowing money to pay interest on money he's already borrowed. It's a dangerous spiral that has destroyed countless growing companies. The solution comes from an unexpected source. Nissho EY, a Japanese trading company, offers to finance Nike's growth through a complex arrangement that essentially makes them a partner in Nike's success. It's not ideal. Knight hates giving up any control, but it's survival. Working with Nissho EY teaches Knight about international business relationships. The Japanese partners think long-term, focusing on building sustainable partnerships rather than maximizing short-term profits. Their patient approach to growth contrasts sharply with American banking culture. But even with better financing, Nike faces operational crises that threaten everything Knight has built. A shipment of shoes arrives from the factory with severe quality defects. Thousands of pairs have to be thrown away, representing months of profit and desperately needed cash flow. Quality control becomes an obsession. Knight realizes that Nike's reputation depends entirely on product reliability. A few bad experiences can destroy years of relationship building in the running community. He starts spending more time in factories, learning about manufacturing processes, demanding higher standards. The stress of constant financial crisis affects everyone in the company. Employees work longer hours for modest pay, never sure if the company will survive another month. Yet somehow this uncertainty creates solidarity rather than fear. The Nike team develops an us-against-the-world mentality that strengthens company culture. Knight's marriage struggles under the pressure. Penny Knight watches her husband work 18-hour days, worry constantly about money, and carry the weight of everyone's livelihood on his shoulders. Entrepreneurship is hard on families, and the Knights pay a personal price for Nike's eventual success. But there are also moments of breakthrough that remind Knight why he started this journey. A letter from a runner whose performance improved after switching to Nike shoes. A coach who calls to say how much his athletes love the new waffle trainers. These small victories sustain Knight through the darkest financial moments. The financial crises teach Knight essential lessons about business management. Growth for its own sake is dangerous. Cash flow management is more important than profitability. Banking relationships require constant attention and communication. And sometimes, survival requires making deals with partners you wouldn't choose under ideal circumstances. By 1975, Nike has survived multiple near-death experiences and emerged stronger. The company has better financing, improved operational systems, and hard-won experience in crisis management. Knight no longer feels like he's improvising everything. He's becoming a real business leader. Chapter 8: The Waffle Revolution and Product Innovation. Bill Bowerman's obsession with improving athletic performance reaches its pinnacle with the development of the waffle sole. What starts as an experiment with his wife's waffle iron becomes Nike's first major technological breakthrough and establishes the company as an innovation leader. The story of the waffle sole has become Nike legend, but the reality is more complex than the folklore suggests. Bowerman doesn't just pour rubber into a waffle iron and create magic. He spends months experimenting with different rubber compounds, sole patterns, and manufacturing techniques. It's methodical, scientific innovation disguised as kitchen table tinkering. The breakthrough comes when Bowerman realizes that the waffle pattern creates optimal traction without adding weight. Traditional running shoe soles are either heavy and grippy or light and slippery. The waffle sole provides excellent traction while remaining remarkably light. It's a genuine performance advantage. But turning Bowerman's prototype into a manufacturable product requires solving dozens of technical challenges. The rubber compounds must be precisely formulated. The waffle pattern must be consistently reproduced in mass production. Quality control standards must ensure that every sole meets Bowerman's exacting specifications. Knight initially doesn't fully appreciate the waffle sole's revolutionary potential. He's focused on keeping the company alive, managing cash flow, and dealing with operational crises. Bowerman's innovations sometimes feel like distractions from more pressing business concerns. But when the first waffle sole shoes reach the market, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Runners notice the difference in traction and comfort within their first few strides. Word spreads rapidly through the running community, and demand explodes beyond Nike's ability to fulfill orders. The waffle sole becomes Nike's first signature technology, but it also creates new challenges. Competitors immediately start trying to copy the design, leading to patent disputes and legal battles. Nike must defend its innovations while continuing to develop new ones. Jeff Johnson, now managing Nike's East Coast operations, becomes the waffle sole's most effective evangelist. He doesn't just sell shoes. He educates customers about the technology, explains the performance benefits, and helps runners understand why Nike's innovations matter. His technical knowledge and passionate advocacy create customer loyalty that goes beyond simple product preference. The success of the waffle sole teaches Nike important lessons about product differentiation. In a competitive market, genuine innovation creates temporary advantages that can be leveraged into lasting brand strength. But innovation must be continuous because competitors will eventually catch up. Bowerman's approach to innovation becomes a model for Nike's entire product development philosophy. Start with athlete needs, experiment relentlessly, test everything under real conditions, and never accept that current solutions are good enough. This mindset drives continuous improvement and keeps Nike ahead of competitors. The waffle sole also establishes Nike's credibility with serious athletes. When elite runners start choosing Nike shoes for important races, it validates the technology and creates aspirational marketing that money can't buy. Other runners want to wear the same shoes as their heroes. But innovation success creates new pressures. Customers expect each new Nike product to offer meaningful improvements over previous versions. The waffle sole sets a standard for innovation that must be maintained and exceeded. Nike realizes that Nike is now in the innovation business as much as the shoe business. The manufacturing challenges of producing waffle soles at scale teach Nike about the complexities of product development. Great ideas mean nothing if they can't be reliably manufactured at reasonable costs. Innovation must be practical as well as creative. By the late 1970s, the waffle sole has become synonymous with Nike innovation. It appears in advertising, gets featured in running magazines, and becomes part of Nike's brand identity. Nike realizes that successful innovation isn't just about creating better products. It's about creating stories that customers want to be part of. Chapter 9, Going Public and Growing Pains. By the late 1970s, Nike has outgrown its ability to finance growth through traditional bank loans and partnerships. The company needs access to capital markets to fund its expansion plans, which means considering an initial public offering. For Nike, this represents both opportunity and terror. Going public means surrendering some control of the company he's built from nothing. It means answering to shareholders who care more about quarterly profits than long-term vision. It means transforming Nike from a passionate entrepreneurial venture into a professionally managed public corporation. But it also means access to the capital needed to compete with much larger competitors like Adidas and Puma. Nike can invest more heavily in research and development, expand international operations, and sign more athlete endorsements. Going public becomes a strategic necessity rather than a personal choice. The process of preparing for an IPO reveals how much Nike has grown and changed since its early days. The company now employs hundreds of people, operates in multiple countries, and manages complex supply chains. Nike must learn new skills in corporate governance, financial reporting, and investor relations. The IPO process also forces Nike to articulate Nike's vision and strategy more clearly than ever before. Potential investors want to understand not just Nike's current performance, but its long-term competitive advantages and growth prospects. Nike must become Nike's chief storyteller as well as its operational leader. When Nike goes public in December 1980, the response exceeds everyone's expectations. The stock price soars, creating instant wealth for Nike and early employees who received stock options. But Nike feels ambivalent about the financial windfall. Money was never his primary motivation. Going public changes Nike's culture in subtle but important ways. Employees who once worked for modest salaries and stock options are now financially secure. The scrappy, everyone pitches in culture begins to give way to more specialized roles and professional management structures. Knight struggles to balance Nike's entrepreneurial culture with the demands of public company governance. He wants to maintain the innovation and risk-taking that made Nike successful, but public companies face pressure to deliver predictable, steady growth. These competing demands create constant tension. The increased visibility that comes with being public brings new opportunities and challenges. Nike can attract better talent, negotiate better deals with suppliers, and command more respect from retailers. But the company also faces more scrutiny from competitors, regulators, and the media. One of Knight's biggest challenges as CEO of a public company is learning to communicate with Wall Street analysts and investors. These audiences care about different things than runners and athletes. They want to understand market share, profit margins, and competitive positioning rather than product innovation and athlete performance. The success of Nike's IPO validates Knight's vision and strategy, but it also creates pressure to maintain rapid growth. Public companies are expected to show consistent improvement in sales and profits. This pressure sometimes conflicts with the patient, long-term thinking that built Nike's success. Managing a public company requires new skills that Knight must learn while continuing to run Nike's day-to-day operations. He takes courses in corporate governance, hires experienced public company executives, and slowly adapts to the demands of quarterly earnings calls and annual shareholder meetings. But despite the challenges, going public proves to be the right decision for Nike. The access to capital enables aggressive expansion plans, increased investment in product development, and the financial flexibility to take calculated risks that would have been impossible as a private company. The experience of going public teaches Knight that successful entrepreneurs must be willing to evolve their leadership styles as their companies grow. The skills that build startups are different from the skills that manage large corporations. Adaptation and continuous learning become essential for long-term success. Chapter 10: The Michael Jordan Revolution. In 1984, Nike faces a critical moment that will define its future. The company has grown successfully in running shoes, but basketball represents a much larger market opportunity. The problem is that Nike has almost no credibility in basketball, a sport dominated by Converse and Adidas. The opportunity comes in the form of Michael Jordan, a talented college player from North Carolina who's entering the NBA draft. Most experts consider Jordan a good but not extraordinary prospect. Adidas, the dominant basketball shoe company, shows only modest interest in signing him. Nike's basketball marketing manager, Sonny Vaccaro, sees something different in Jordan. He believes Jordan has the potential to become a transcendent athlete, someone who could change how people think about basketball and athletic endorsements. Vaccaro lobbies hard for Nike to pursue Jordan aggressively. Knight is initially skeptical about investing heavily in basketball marketing. Nike's expertise is in running, and basketball seems like an expensive distraction from their core competencies. The economics of athlete endorsements in basketball are much different from running, requiring larger upfront investments with uncertain returns. But Vaccaro's persistence and Jordan's obvious talent convince Knight to take a calculated risk. Nike decides to offer Jordan an unprecedented endorsement deal, including equity in the company and his own signature shoe line. It's a radical departure from traditional endorsement models. The negotiation with Jordan and his agent, David Falk, is complex and sometimes tense. Jordan actually prefers Adidas and has to be convinced that Nike offers better long-term opportunities. The deal that emerges gives Jordan more money and control than any basketball player has ever received. Creating the Air Jordan shoe line requires Nike to develop new expertise in basketball shoe design and marketing. The shoes must perform well on basketball courts, but they must also make a fashion statement off the court. This dual purpose changes how Nike thinks about product development. The marketing campaign for Air Jordan breaks new ground in athlete endorsement advertising. Instead of just showing Jordan wearing Nike shoes, the ads focus on his personality, his competitive drive, and his aspiration to greatness. The Just Do It campaign, though not yet fully developed, begins to take shape. Jordan's rookie season exceeds everyone's expectations, including his own. He wins Rookie of the Year, makes the All-Star team, and begins to show the extraordinary talents that will make him arguably the greatest basketball player ever. Nike's investment starts looking like genius rather than speculation. But the real breakthrough comes off the court. The Air Jordan shoes become fashion statements, worn by people who never play basketball. Jordan's style, charisma, and winning attitude make Nike shoes desirable in ways that pure athletic performance cannot. Nike discovers the power of lifestyle marketing. The success of Air Jordan transforms Nike from a running shoe company into a global athletic lifestyle brand. Sales explode, not just in basketball shoes but across all Nike product lines. Jordan's success creates a halo effect that elevates Nike's entire brand identity. But the Jordan partnership also teaches Nike about the risks of building a brand around individual personalities. Jordan's every action on and off the court affects Nike's reputation. Managing athlete endorsements requires careful attention to personal conduct as well as athletic performance. The financial returns from the Jordan partnership exceed Nike's most optimistic projections. Air Jordan becomes a billion-dollar brand within a few years, generating profits that fund Nike's expansion into new sports and international markets. One successful endorsement deal transforms the entire company. Nike realizes that the Jordan success represents a new model for athletic marketing. Instead of simply sponsoring athletes, Nike is creating partnerships that align the athlete's success with the company's success. This alignment creates more authentic endorsements and better business results. The cultural impact of Air Jordan extends far beyond sports marketing. Jordan and Nike together help create the modern athletic lifestyle culture, where sports performance products become everyday fashion choices. This cultural shift creates enormous new market opportunities. Chapter 11: International Expansion and Global Challenges. By the mid-1980s, Nike's success in America creates both opportunities and pressures to expand internationally. The global athletic footwear market is much larger than the domestic market, but international expansion requires new skills, different strategies, and significant investment in unfamiliar territories. Nike's first international markets are English-speaking countries where Nike's brand identity and marketing messages translate relatively easily. Canada, Australia, and the United Kingdom become testing grounds for international operations and help Nike learn the basics of global business. But Europe represents the biggest prize and the greatest challenge. European athletic footwear markets are dominated by local brands like Adidas and Puma, companies with deep roots in European sports culture and decades of established relationships with athletes, retailers, and consumers. Nike's approach to European expansion reflects lessons learned from Nike's early struggles. Instead of trying to compete directly with established brands on their terms, Nike focuses on sports and market segments where American innovation and style can create competitive advantages. Basketball becomes Nike's European beachhead. The European expansion reveals cultural differences that go far deeper than language barriers. European consumers have different relationships with athletic brands, different expectations about product quality and durability, and different ideas about what constitutes authentic sports marketing. Nike must adapt without losing its essential identity. Manufacturing strategies also become more complex as Nike expands globally. Serving international markets from Asian factories requires sophisticated supply chain management, currency hedging, and inventory planning. Nike learns that global businesses face risks and complexities that domestic companies never encounter. The most significant challenge in international expansion is building brand awareness from zero in markets where competitors have decades of established presence. Nike can't rely on word-of-mouth marketing in the running community because those networks don't exist in the same way outside America. European advertising and marketing require different approaches than domestic campaigns. Cultural references that resonate with American audiences fall flat in Europe. Nike must develop new creative strategies while maintaining consistent brand identity across diverse markets. Working with European retailers teaches Nike about different business practices and relationship expectations. European retail partnerships often involve longer-term commitments, more formal contractual arrangements, and different expectations about marketing support and product exclusivity. But international expansion also creates new opportunities for innovation and learning. European athletes and consumers provide feedback that leads to product improvements. Different climate conditions and usage patterns reveal weaknesses in product design that weren't apparent in American markets. The economics of international business require new financial skills and systems. Currency fluctuations can turn profitable deals into losses overnight. International tax planning becomes essential for maintaining competitive pricing. Nike must learn to think like a global CFO as well as a brand builder. Nike's international expansion accelerates during the late 1980s, driven partly by the global popularity of Michael Jordan and the Air Jordan brand. Basketball's international appeal creates opportunities that wouldn't exist for running-focused marketing strategies. But success in international markets also creates new competitive pressures at home. As Nike becomes a global brand, domestic competitors adopt more aggressive strategies to defend their home market positions. International success doesn't guarantee continued domestic dominance. Nike learns that managing a global company requires different leadership skills than building a domestic business. Time zones, cultural differences, and communication challenges mean that the hands-on management style that worked in Nike's early days becomes impossible at global scale. The infrastructure requirements for global operations transformed Nike from an entrepreneurial startup into a sophisticated multinational corporation. Information systems, logistics networks, and management structures must all evolve to support operations across multiple continents and time zones. By the early 1990s, Nike's international business generates significant revenues and profits, validating Nike's expansion strategy. But global success also creates new responsibilities and challenges that will define Nike's next phase of development. Chapter 12: Corporate Responsibility and Manufacturing Controversies. As Nike grows into a global corporation, the company faces new types of challenges that Nike never anticipated during the early entrepreneurial years. Media scrutiny increases, activist groups target Nike's manufacturing practices, and the company must navigate complex political and social issues in multiple countries. The manufacturing controversy begins when labor activists start investigating conditions in Nike's Asian factories. Reports emerge of low wages, long working hours, and poor working conditions in facilities that produce Nike shoes. These reports create public relations crises that threaten Nike's carefully cultivated brand image. Nike's initial response reflects his engineering background and problem-solving mentality. He sees the manufacturing issues as operational problems to be fixed rather than fundamental questions about Nike's business model. This analytical approach sometimes comes across as defensive or insensitive to critics. But the manufacturing controversy teaches Nike that global corporations have responsibilities that extend far beyond their direct employees. Nike's brand success depends partly on how the company treats workers throughout its supply chain, even in factories that Nike doesn't own or directly control. The complexity of global manufacturing makes simple solutions impossible. Nike works with dozens of factories across multiple countries, each operating under different legal systems, cultural norms, and economic conditions. Implementing consistent labor standards requires new management systems and oversight capabilities. Nike realizes that Nike must become more proactive in addressing manufacturing issues rather than simply reacting to criticism. The company develops new supplier standards, implements monitoring systems, and invests in factory improvements that go beyond legal requirements. But the manufacturing controversy also reveals the limitations of individual corporate action. Many of the problems in Nike's supply chain reflect broader economic and political issues in developing countries. Nike can improve its own practices, but can't single-handedly solve systemic problems. The experience with manufacturing controversies changes how Nike thinks about corporate leadership. Being CEO of a global corporation means accepting responsibility for issues that extend far beyond traditional business concerns. Social and political considerations become integral to business strategy. Nike's response to manufacturing criticism evolves over time from defensive to proactive. The company begins publishing detailed reports about factory conditions, working with NGOs to improve labor practices, and investing in community development programs in manufacturing regions. These corporate responsibility initiatives require new expertise and management capabilities. Nike hires specialists in labor relations, environmental sustainability, and community development. The company's mission expands beyond making great products to include positive social impact. But addressing manufacturing controversies also creates competitive challenges. Improving labor standards and factory conditions increases production costs, which can put Nike at a disadvantage against competitors who don't make similar investments in social responsibility. Nike learns that corporate responsibility isn't just about doing the right thing. It's also about protecting brand value and maintaining customer loyalty in markets where consumers increasingly care about how products are made, not just how they perform. The manufacturing controversy becomes a catalyst for broader changes in how Nike operates as a global corporation. The company develops more sophisticated stakeholder management capabilities, invests more heavily in public relations and communications, and adopts more transparent reporting practices. By the late 1990s, Nike's approach to manufacturing and corporate responsibility has evolved significantly from Nike's initial defensive reactions. The company has become an industry leader in supply chain transparency and labor standards improvement, though challenges and criticism continue. Chapter 13: Leadership Transitions and Succession Planning. As Nike enters the 1990s, Nike faces a challenge that many successful entrepreneurs struggle with. How do you transition from being the indispensable founder to creating an organization that can thrive without you? Nike's leadership style worked perfectly for building Nike, but scaling and sustaining the company requires different approaches. The challenge becomes urgent as Nike grows beyond Nike's ability to personally manage every important decision. The company now employs thousands of people, operates in dozens of countries, and faces complex strategic decisions that require expertise Nike doesn't possess. Nike's first attempts at delegation are difficult and sometimes unsuccessful. He's used to being involved in every important decision, and trusting others with critical responsibilities doesn't come naturally. Early efforts to distribute leadership authority create confusion and sometimes conflict within the organization. But Nike gradually learns that effective delegation isn't just about giving people tasks. It's about creating systems, establishing clear accountability, and developing people's capabilities so they can make good decisions independently. This requires new leadership skills that Nike must develop. The process of building Nike's management team reveals how much the company has changed from its entrepreneurial origins. Nike now needs specialists in finance, operations, marketing, and international business. The generalist approach that worked in the early days becomes inadequate for managing complexity. Nike's relationship with longtime colleagues like Jeff Johnson and Bob Woodell evolves as the company grows. These early employees shared Nike's entrepreneurial journey, but they must also adapt to new roles in a much larger, more professional organization. Finding and developing the next generation of Nike leaders becomes one of Nike's most important responsibilities. The company needs people who understand Nike's culture and values but also possess the professional management skills required for global operations. Nike experiments with different organizational structures and management approaches, sometimes successfully and sometimes not. Leading a global corporation requires different skills than building a startup, and Knight must learn through trial and error how to create effective management systems. The succession planning process forces Knight to think more systematically about Nike's long-term future. What kind of leadership will the company need in 10 or 20 years? How should Nike prepare for competitive challenges that don't exist today but might emerge in the future? But Knight also realizes that successful succession isn't just about finding the right individual to replace him. It's about creating organizational capabilities that don't depend on any single leader, including himself. This requires building stronger systems, processes, and cultural foundations. The leadership development process at Nike becomes more formal and systematic as the company matures. High-potential employees receive broader experience, management training, and mentorship from senior executives. Nike invests more heavily in developing internal talent rather than relying primarily on external hiring. Knight's own role evolves from hands-on operational leader to strategic advisor and culture guardian. He remains involved in major decisions but delegates increasing responsibility for day-to-day management to other executives. The transition process isn't always smooth. Some longtime employees struggle to adapt to Nike's more professional management culture. Others thrive in the new environment and emerge as strong leaders for Nike's next phase of development. By the late 1990s, Nike has developed a strong bench of management talent and more sophisticated organizational systems. Knight has successfully navigated the transition from entrepreneurial founder to professional CEO, though he continues to play an active role in shaping Nike's direction. Chapter 14: The Digital Revolution and New Challenges. As the 1990s progress, Nike faces new competitive challenges from an unexpected source. Digital technology is beginning to transform how consumers shop, how brands communicate with customers, and how businesses operate. Knight must lead Nike's adaptation to this digital revolution. The internet creates new opportunities for direct customer relationships that bypass traditional retail channels. Nike can now communicate directly with consumers, sell products online, and gather customer feedback in ways that were impossible during the company's first 20 years. But digital transformation also creates new vulnerabilities. Online retailers can offer broader product selections and lower prices than traditional stores. Information spreads faster, making brand management more complex. Customers have higher expectations for personalization and responsiveness. Knight's approach to digital transformation reflects his lifelong pattern of careful observation followed by bold action. Nike experiments with early digital marketing campaigns, e-commerce platforms, and customer relationship management systems, learning through small-scale tests before making major investments. The digital revolution accelerates changes in consumer behavior that create both opportunities and threats for Nike. Younger consumers are more comfortable with online shopping, more influenced by social media, and more interested in personalized products and experiences. Nike's digital strategy focuses on enhancing rather than replacing traditional retail relationships. The company uses digital tools to support retail partners while also developing direct-to-consumer capabilities that can provide better customer experiences and higher profit margins. The complexity of digital marketing requires new expertise and organizational capabilities. Nike hires specialists in web design, digital advertising, and customer analytics. These new employees bring different perspectives and skills that sometimes clash with Nike's traditional culture. But digital technology also enables new forms of product innovation. Nike begins experimenting with smart devices, connected fitness platforms, and data-driven product development. Technology becomes integral to product strategy, not just marketing and sales. The speed of digital change creates new pressures for rapid decision-making and continuous adaptation. Nike must learn to operate more quickly and flexibly than in the past, while still maintaining the strategic focus and quality standards that built the brand. Knight realizes that digital transformation isn't just about technology. It's about changing how Nike operates as an organization. Communication patterns, decision-making processes, and customer relationships all must evolve to succeed in the digital age. The global nature of digital platforms creates new opportunities for international expansion. Nike can reach customers in new markets more easily and cost-effectively than through traditional retail expansion. But digital competition is also more global and intense. By the end of the 1990s, Nike has successfully begun its digital transformation while maintaining its core brand identity and competitive advantages. The company has learned to use digital tools to enhance rather than replace the authentic relationships with athletes and customers that built Nike's success. Chapter 15. Personal Reflections and Life Lessons. As Knight writes his memoir, he reflects on the personal journey that parallels Nike's corporate evolution. The shy, insecure young man who started with a crazy idea has become a confident business leader, but the transformation hasn't been easy or without costs. The demands of building Nike affected every aspect of Knight's personal life. Long working hours, constant travel, and the stress of repeated financial crises strained his marriage and limited time with his children. Success in business required sacrifices in other areas of life. Knight's relationship with his father evolves throughout Nike's development. Initially skeptical of his son's entrepreneurial ambitions, the elder Knight gradually becomes proud of what Phil has accomplished. But Phil sometimes wonders if he spent too much time proving himself to his father and not enough time enjoying the journey. The early Nike employees become like family to Knight, sharing not just professional success but personal bonds forged through years of shared struggle and eventual triumph. These relationships, formed under pressure and sustained through good times and bad, become some of Knight's most meaningful life connections. But Knight also acknowledges the psychological costs of entrepreneurship. The constant uncertainty, the weight of responsibility for others' livelihoods, and the pressure to make countless critical decisions created anxiety and stress that lasted for decades. The financial success that comes with Nike's growth creates new challenges and responsibilities. Knight must learn to manage wealth, consider philanthropic opportunities, and think about how his success can benefit others beyond Nike's employees and shareholders. Looking back, Knight recognizes that luck played a significant role in Nike's success. Meeting Bill Bowerman, encountering Steve Prefontaine, signing Michael Jordan. These weren't just good decisions. They were fortunate circumstances that could easily have turned out differently. But Knight also believes that entrepreneurs create their own luck by being prepared for opportunities when they arise. Nike's success resulted from years of hard work, continuous learning, and willingness to take calculated risks when others were too cautious. The memoir writing process helps Knight understand patterns in his own decision-making and leadership style. He sees how his engineering background influenced his approach to problems, how his competitive nature drove Nike's culture, and how his willingness to adapt enabled the company's evolution. Knight's advice to aspiring entrepreneurs reflects hard-won experience rather than abstract theories. Start with something you're passionate about. Surround yourself with people who share your mission. Be prepared for setbacks and learn from failures. Never give up on your core vision, but be flexible about how you achieve it. But Knight also emphasizes that entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. It requires extraordinary personal sacrifice, tolerance for uncertainty, and ability to persist through repeated failures. The rewards can be substantial, but the costs are real and shouldn't be underestimated. The personal relationships formed during Nike's early years remain important to Knight decades later. Jeff Johnson, Bob Waddell, and other early employees aren't just former colleagues. They're people who shared a unique journey and understand Knight's experience in ways that others cannot. As he concludes his memoir, Knight expresses gratitude for the opportunity to build something meaningful and lasting. Nike has become larger than he ever imagined, but it has also remained true to its original mission of serving athletes and advancing human performance. The legacy of Shoe Dog. Phil Knight's Shoe Dog is much more than a business memoir. It's an honest, vulnerable account of what it really takes to build something extraordinary from nothing. Knight doesn't sanitize the story or pretend that success was inevitable. He shows us the fear, the uncertainty, and the countless moments when everything could have fallen apart. The book reveals that entrepreneurship isn't glamorous. It's grinding, exhausting work with no guarantees of success. Knight spent years worrying about money, sleeping poorly, and carrying the weight of other people's livelihoods on his shoulders. But he also experienced the unique satisfaction that comes from creating something valuable that didn't exist before. Nike's success wasn't the result of a brilliant master plan executed flawlessly. It emerged from thousands of small decisions, many of them mistakes, adapted and improved over time. Knight's willingness to acknowledge uncertainty and learn from failures becomes one of his greatest strengths as a leader. The relationships in Shoe Dog are as important as the business strategies. Knight's partnerships with Bill Bowerman, Jeff Johnson, and other early Nike employees weren't just professional arrangements. They were deep personal connections forged through shared struggle and mutual commitment to something larger than themselves. The book also illustrates how much businesses depend on timing and external circumstances beyond their control. Nike benefited from the running boom, the growth of athletic lifestyle culture, and the emergence of global supply chains. Knight made good decisions, but he also operated in favorable conditions. But perhaps most importantly, Shoe Dog demonstrates the power of persistence. Knight faced bankruptcy multiple times, endured constant criticism, and overcame countless obstacles that would have stopped less determined entrepreneurs. His refusal to give up on his crazy idea ultimately made all the difference. The memoir reminds us that great companies aren't built in isolation. Nike succeeded because it served a community of runners who shared Knight's passion for the sport. The company's authenticity came from Knight's genuine understanding of what athletes needed, not from market research or focus groups. Knight's writing style in Shoe Dog reflects his personality, direct, honest, and unpretentious. He doesn't try to position himself as a visionary genius. He presents himself as he was, an ordinary person who pursued an extraordinary idea with uncommon determination. The book offers valuable lessons for anyone building something new, whether it's a company, a career, or a personal project. Success requires passion, persistence, adaptability, and the willingness to take calculated risks. But it also requires humility, continuous learning, and the ability to build genuine relationships with others who share your mission. Shoe Dog ultimately tells a very American story about the possibilities that exist when freedom, opportunity, and determination intersect. Knight started with nothing but an idea and built one of the world's most recognizable brands. His journey proves that extraordinary achievement remains possible for ordinary people willing to work extraordinarily hard. The memoir ends not with triumphant celebration, but with quiet satisfaction and gratitude. Knight accomplished more than he ever dreamed, but he also understands that his success depended on many factors beyond his control. This combination of pride and humility makes Shoe Dog both inspiring and authentic. For readers interested in entrepreneurship, Shoe Dog provides an unvarnished look at what building a business really entails. The glamorous success story we see from the outside masks years of uncertainty, sacrifice, and near-constant crisis management. Knight's honesty about these challenges makes his eventual success even more impressive. But the book appeals to much more than aspiring entrepreneurs. It's a story about following your passion, even when others think you're crazy. It's about the satisfaction that comes from creating something meaningful and lasting. And it's about the relationships and experiences that matter more than money or fame. Knight's memoir reminds us that the most meaningful achievements often begin with crazy ideas that sensible people dismiss. Blue Ribbon Sports seemed like a foolish venture to most observers in 1962. 5 decades later, Nike generates tens of billions of dollars in annual revenue and employs hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. The transformation from Phil Knight's crazy idea to Nike's global empire illustrates the compound power of consistent effort applied over time. Small improvements, accumulated year after year, can produce extraordinary results. But this requires patience, persistence, and faith in your vision when others doubt your sanity. Shoe Dog concludes with Knight stepping back from day-to-day operations but remaining connected to the company he built. Nike has become larger than any individual, including its founder. This transition from entrepreneurial startup to enduring institution represents the ultimate success for any business builder. Today, as we lace up our Nikes and see the swoosh logo everywhere from professional sports to everyday fashion, it's worth remembering the unlikely journey that brought us here. Phil Knight's memoir ensures that the full story gets told, with all its messiness, uncertainty, and very human struggles. The book stands as a testament to what becomes possible when ordinary people pursue extraordinary dreams with uncommon determination. Knight's journey from selling shoes out of his car trunk to building a global empire proves that the American dream remains alive for those willing to work for it. Shoe Dog isn't just Phil Knight's story. It's a story about the power of believing in something when no one else does, the importance of surrounding yourself with people who share your vision, and the satisfaction that comes from creating something that makes the world a little bit better. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an athlete, or simply someone who believes that ordinary people can accomplish extraordinary things, Phil Knight's memoir offers inspiration, practical wisdom, and hope. It reminds us that every great company, every meaningful achievement, and every lasting legacy begins with someone willing to pursue their crazy idea, no matter what the obstacles. And that's the enduring message of Shoe Dog. Dreams are worth pursuing even when they seem impossible. Especially when they seem impossible. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into Phil Knight's extraordinary memoir. If this exploration of Shoe Dog has inspired you, I encourage you to read the full book. Knight's own words carry an authenticity and emotional power that no summary can fully capture. Remember to subscribe to Legacy Book Insight for more deep dives into the books that built empires, changed industries, and shaped our world. Until next time, keep reading, keep learning, and keep pursuing your own crazy ideas. You never know where they might lead.